Unfortunately, that is true.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
As it is for Sunday, we have Joseph Chuman, our leader, as the speaker. Dr. Chuman has been the leader of the Ethical Culture Society of Bergen County since 1974. He's served as a part-time leader at the New York Society for Ethical Culture since 2008. Joe teaches human rights at the graduate level at Columbia University and has taught at the United Nations University for Peace in San Jose, Costa Rica. He has published numerous articles in the Record of Bergen County, New Jersey. Joe's title this morning is Ethical Culture and Human Solidarity. And now, please welcome our leader, Dr. Joseph Chuman.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so very much, Susan, for the warm introduction. And I want to extend a greeting to everybody who's here today. It's become almost a commonplace salutation, but I hope you're all staying safe and healthy, and I'm sure everyone is taking the necessary precautions to do so. It's good to have you all together. I get a sense that there's a strong need for community and bondedness, and that's really what I'm going to be talking about this morning. So I have an address, and then afterwards there'll be ample time for people to raise questions or to share where you're at and some ideas on the themes that and values that I'm going to be discussing. So let me begin, if I will. I have to turn to my text, which I have up right now. I can't see you. I can just see what I've written, but you can see me, I trust. So let me move ahead and see where we go here. I've entitled my address, Ethical Culture and Human Solidarity. I suspect that many of you experience your daily lives much as I do. We are creatures of routine and habit, and as such, much of what we do day to day is fairly predictable. Sometimes marvelous things surprisingly do happen, and sometimes we plan for experiences we hope will be especially interesting, joyful, and exciting that stand out from our ordinary routines. I find it somewhat amusing that the word awesome has become so frequently employed because the very little in life, I argue, is truly awesome. It is almost as if by denominating the ordinary as awesome, we make it so in such a way that the employment of the word itself magically turns the dross of experience into gold. Sure, we all experience captivating high points, maybe even on rare occasions, ecstatic moments. But I suspect that most of the time we walk through a landscape of gray. Much of life, especially in its broad outlines, is familiar, and a lot of it is just merely coping. Not boring, but in a range that lies in the middle between excessive highs and excessive lows. Most of our life experiences are ordinary, but the times we are living in now, as you well know, are anything but ordinary. We are living through a truly exceptional and unique event, and we are all experiencing the same thing at the same time. And with these changed circumstances that are virtually surreal have come changes not only in our behaviors, but in our consciousness, our moods, and in our awareness. There is also changed behavior that this extraordinary pandemic has imposed upon us, as we all know. The behavioral changes we are forced to undergo also serve to focus our thoughts in particular directions and in particular ways. And with that change in focus, certain values, I maintain, have come to the fore. Values which human beings have always expressed, but in these extraordinary circumstances have become highlighted and have gained greater prominence and importance, and which I personally find very compelling. The values that the pandemic has brought forward, among many others, I believe, are very humanistic ones. I'd like to share with you some of these values that I find highlighted in these extraordinary times. They stand in relief from the way we usually appreciate them in normal times. Ironically, emerging out of this awful condition are expressions of humanity and human decency that I believe merit our great appreciation. While not overstating it, the worst of times can bring forth the best that is in us. And because they do, they may have, I would hope, some lasting effects for us and our society once this plague is over. I certainly hope so. As we all know too well, we are living under a condition of looming danger, and that danger is growing stronger, and it feels as if it is moving closer and closer to us, as in fact it is. It's as if we are all protagonists in our own horror movie. We're walking through a dark forest and feel that the creatures, which are aggressive and merciless, and yes, invisible, are lurking all around. And we need to be in a state of constant and heightened vigilance, lest we fall prey to illness and perhaps to death, which they are designed to deliver. We live with uncertainty. Uncertainty as to whether the person we pass on the street is a carrier of the infection, whether we have caught it ourselves or will catch it, and how long this plague will last. There are other anxieties. Perhaps we are among those who worry that we'll find ourselves without a job and face the anxiety, the looming anxiety of having to pay our bills without adequate resources. No doubt, anxiety, a pervasive anxiety, is the normal response to the condition we are in. And the only consolations that we are able to muster are that we're all in it together, and that we can hold out the totally reasonable hope that one day it will end and our lives will return to normal. Perhaps for many, this anxiety, the cause of which is all around, gets under our skin. It becomes our default position, so to speak, and we are pleased when we're able to escape it through a chat with a friend on a phone, or when we're able to lose ourselves in work, which I should say personally I've been happy to be able to do. As we all know, excuse me for a second. Okay, lost my page there. As we all know, it is going to get worse before it gets better. As the plague, excuse me, technical difficulty here, friends. We'll be back in just a few seconds. Okay, as we all know, it's going to get worse before it gets better. As the plague moves closer to us, and we come to know or know of more and more people who have fallen ill, our preoccupations with COVID-19, our anxiety and distress can only grow deeper. At that point, we will enter a new stage emotionally that will require of us that we dig down deeper into the well of our personal resources in order to cope. And moreover, that we be able to draw from our greatest resource, which is one another. This is the centerpiece of my message to you this morning, but I'll get to that later. First, I have a few other observations. What has befallen us is unique in our experience and carries an element of unreality about it. Part of our routine life is usually grounded in the assumptions that our reality is stable. We walk through life taking for granted that the fixed points that anchor our daily existence will be present tomorrow, reinforcing our sense of the familiar. We take for granted that the sun will rise tomorrow. The house we live in will still be standing, that our loved ones will be at our sides. This sense of stability is only interrupted when something totally unexpected and accidental intervenes to subvert the sense of order which we internalize and use to anchor our lives. It is interrupted when we experience a severe and debilitating accident, or when a loved one suddenly and unexpectedly dies. It is at that point that we may come to realize that there's a very real element of fragility in the human existential condition. The Greek historian Herodotus had once written, quote, "Count no person happy until his last day," end quote, in the understanding that there is an element of radical contingency in human life. However much security and order we bring into our lives, we still walk on shaky ground. My point is that we all need that sense of order and security in order to feel as comfortable as we can in this world. But I think it is a source of wisdom and humility to also know that there are elements in life that we cannot predict and control. And then when it comes to our own destiny, we may not have the last word. As humanists, we may marvel at the civilization we human beings have created for millennia, arriving at this, the 21st century, and how smart we human beings have become. But I think that a humble humanism should remind us that there are forces in nature that are greater than we are, and the ability to manipulate and control our fate is at best only partial. To deny that larger existential fact, I think, is a kind of hubris, which in my personal opinion is unworthy of the farther reaches of our humanity. The pandemic that we are enduring at this moment, that seemed with great rapidity to have come from nowhere, is the greatest manifestation in our lifetimes, and I think I speak for everyone, that speaks to this contingency, to the fragility of the human condition. Though painful and menacing in a strange way, I think it makes us more sober and wiser about the human condition. It seems surreal. The fragility of the human condition is manifested in the fact that almost all of American society, except for essential services, and much of global society, has come to an almost immediate halt. Tens of millions of people used to going to work daily suddenly don't. Weddings anticipated with great joy in a few months ahead have been summarily canceled. Mourning the dead is done alone, at a distance, or not at all. Social gatherings of all kinds have disappeared. Spectator and participatory sports don't take place. Theaters and movie houses have darkened and been shuttered. With the speed of light, the totally abnormal has become the new normal, made necessary by the weight of caution and the pain of fear, illness, and death. And it has required immediate and radical readjustment of our lives, and I think it is quite amazing that so many people, at least for the time being, have been able to do so. They've been able to make those adjustments. The pain of canceling anticipated joyous events or making other radical changes, which at normal times would have been experienced with great misery as standalone experiences, I suspect that that burden, the burden that would come with that, is somewhat lightened by the power of necessity and the knowledge that my readjustment is shared with others, and fate has not selected me out for special treatment. Woe is me is less woeful when everyone is in the same boat. Which leads me to a second value that is highlighted by this menace, and that is the universality inherent in this strange experience. The plague perhaps uniquely raises in our consciousness that we are components of the fabric of humanity, united by a common thread and joined now in a common struggle. The coronavirus pandemic brings to the fore that we are stitched together in a common web of humanity, which places upon us obligations to others, to friends and strangers alike. This universality, much a mainstay of ethical culture and its values, goes to the center of my message, but it needs to be somewhat qualified, I think. That we share a common humanity with all other people on this small planet is a commonplace, virtually a cliche, but it is a reality that I think is too often blinded by our preoccupation with the differences that divide us, seldom as virulently as in these times. I believe in a common human nature, universally shared by all people, which these days, I should say parenthetically, has become a controversial claim to make in certain circles, and I'm thinking certain academic circles. I believe in a common humanity that transcends race, religion, language, sex, gender, class, social status, and all those other categories that many have invoked through the ages to divide people from one another, often in the quest for dominion and power. We human beings are fractious and contentious creatures. We like to argue, to bicker, and to fight with one another. We like to assert our own truths and bask in our own sense of righteousness and superiority. Many like to win, and for many there is glory in asserting their superiority over others. And many find it difficult and uncomfortable to tolerate those who are different from themselves. And indeed, people are different from one another. Accommodating to difference is often hard. On the individual level, different people do really value different things. And in that sense, we are all unique. And on the group level, various cultures do espouse different values and exercise different ways of life. In these times, for a host of complex reasons, the differences that divide have become particularly strident. American society, but not only our society, has become dangerously polarized and detribalized around issues of race, ethnicity, nationality, gender, and increasingly political opinion. The divisions between us and them and the stoking of hate across lines of division seem to come just too easily these days. It is because of this emphasis on what divides us that I believe that a commitment to the universality of the human experience, what we all have in common, has been submerged and is very much in need of revival. Beneath the differences, I believe that all human beings, beneath these differences, I believe that all human beings hold things in common beyond the biological needs for food and shelter and enough economic security to live a life without severe deprivation. Beyond those things, biological needs, I believe there is a longing that all people share, a longing for community, for friendship, a desire to be loved, an ability to find help in times of distress, an opportunity to be a productive member of society and find fulfillment through work, and the need to be respected and to have one's dignity upheld. These and other attributes are the mainstays, I hold, of a common and universal humanity and need to form the groundwork on which to build a humane society, indeed any society, regardless of differences, both individual and communal, which again are no doubt real. There are simply some things that are good for all people and some things that are bad for all people, regardless of culture, race, religion, language, gender, sex, and all those other categories that, in effect, traditionally have divided us. The unusual times we are in, I believe, illuminate our common humanity in the way in which perhaps no phenomenon whatsoever has done so in our lifetimes. The pandemic is global, and from the standpoint of the virus, each and every one of us is equally a potential victim, a potential host. The virus does not discriminate based on nationality, political persuasion, ethnicity, race, or gender, and all those qualifiers, again, that divide human beings from each other and with which we render with so much importance and with which we have become so preoccupied. The virus that doesn't care about these things, and treats us all as one and the same. This virus reminds us that we are all the same in our desire to be safe and healthy and to cherish and preserve our lives. In other words, with regard to what matters most. We share this value in common with all other people, whoever and wherever they are. And if this realization illuminates that universal value in our eyes and enables it to shine ever more brightly, and moreover, if it gains any traction after this passes, then something good may indeed come from this horror. But I have to say, this universalism that emerges from the virus's standpoint needs some qualification when we look at it from our own. The point I'm making here is that while all of us are in danger of becoming ill, not all of us are equally in danger. Many of us who work behind a desk can find ourselves being able to work from home, as I'm sure many of us in the ethical society are. But what the plague brings to the fore, I think, what it highlights is that there are many who are at the bottom rungs of the economic ladder for whom the society increasingly treats as invisible, who need to go to work, who must go to work, ride the subways and buses, and therefore put themselves at greater risk. I think of the grocery store clerks, delivery people, Walmart employees, transit workers, plumbers, and home health aides whose work does not permit them the relative safety of social distancing. Coronavirus is indeed hitting lower income neighborhoods the hardest. The universality highlighted by the pandemic, therefore, I maintain, is a qualified universality. We are all at risk, but some of us are more at risk than others. And I would conclude that any ethics worthy of its name would declare that that reality is intolerable. My hope is that after this passes, that the inequality of risk and danger that society and not nature has dictated will inspire political movements to ensure greater economic egalitarianism, so that the relative safety that we enjoy, the preservation of our lives, others will enjoy, and who falls ill and who dies will not be determined by who the contingency of having been born into the wrong social class or zip code is the determinant. Hopefully this plague will raise political consciousness and again inspire more people to work for an economically just society. But if we're talking about inequality, there is even a more striking reality that impresses itself upon us. I am sure we are all moved, I certainly am, by the heroism of those workers in New York hospitals, for example, who are working to the point of exhaustion to try to save the lives of tens of thousands of COVID-19 victims as the patients overflow the corridors and will continue to come in increasing numbers for weeks to come. They need to work intimately with patients who are virulently contagious and thus are putting themselves at great risk. And indeed, many doctors and nurses, as we read, and other health professionals have themselves gotten sick as well. The analogy to the battlefield here, I think, is apt. They are also putting at risk, of course, their families to whom they return when they go home, when their shifts end, only to return again to environments that are relentlessly demanding, relentlessly demanding. Okay, hold on again. Okay. Demanding, I was going to say physically and emotionally. So I dread to contemplate that in a few days, the relentless numbers of patients streaming into city hospitals will in fact outstrip the resources to care for them. And doctors will be confronted with triage, that is, having to decide which patients will be saved and who will be condemned to death. And they will have to make these decisions on a continuous, ongoing basis. I personally think of few environments more morally and emotionally demanding and draining than this. Yet through economic differences we have made in this country, the richest society on the planet, and yet we are indeed stuck with this situation that may require that fretful decision involved in triage. But the economic disparities that lead to that circumstance, the lack of sufficient ventilators, and so on and so forth, that's a story for another day. But consider, if we examine doctors for a moment, those who are on the front lines, the heroes putting themselves at the greatest risk are not, friends, hedge fund traders, corporate CEOs, stockbrokers, members of the 1%, or people obsessing about their stock portfolios. They are the nurses, the orderlies, the janitors who clean the infected rooms, the workers who change the bed sheets. In other words, those doing the most important life-saving work are again those who occupy the bottom rungs of the economic ladder. Let's also include, I would say, sanitation workers who put themselves at great risk all the time, but especially now, whom society treats as simply invisible, and indeed very often disparages. These are the people we turn to save our lives, and not the plutocrats, the wealthy and the super wealthy, the men for whom, in effect, our society perversely valorizes and esteems. When it comes to those on the front lines, I cannot help but be moved. In an environment in which moral values have become so corrupted, in which science and reason and expertise have been so denigrated, in which mendacity has replaced truthfulness and honesty, in which small-mindedness and pettiness seem to have polluted our society, it is crucial to know that goodness is still possible, that life remains a cherished value, that those in greatest need remain deserving of our care and even sacrifice. Friends, I think there is absolutely no place for cynicism here. What we're witnessing is pure heroism. I think we need those who are on the front lines of this battle to not only save our lives, but indeed save the soul of our society. May the inspiration emerging from the best of us endure again to help transform our society towards better ends and better values after this virus runs its course. I should also mention that in my view, that in these corrupted times, when basic norms of civilized life have been so much under attack and so much undermined, that most Americans seem, I think, from what I see, most Americans seem to be doing the right thing, recognizing legitimate expertise, not disparaging the authority of science, and behaving in a manner which is both rational and benign. This too, I think, it's a bit of a surprise. This too, I think, should give us hope and is something that we can build on in reconstructing a sane society. And finally, I want to end my reflections with a value I touched upon earlier, and that is how the common challenge we confront illuminates the reality that we are all joined together in a common humanity. We are part of the web of humanity, a common family that evokes from us a common affinity and common obligations that we need to extend to everyone, both those known and those unknown to us. I think that the bond that joins us is evoked paradoxically in the need for social distancing, which runs against, I believe, our fundamental natures. We are social creatures, and the need to be together with others is a need that reaches very deeply. For the most part, we all need to hug one another, physically greet one another, and feel the presence of other human beings through occupying shared and proximate space. Even though we may at times crave our solitude, to be apart from others is unnatural and over time painful. Social distancing has illuminated how much we value the presence of others because we are forced to be without it. And so people have contrived all kinds of creative ways to try to lessen the pain of that distance. We in the Ethical Society and millions around our country and the world have been able to employ electronic media, as we're doing right at this moment, in order to see each other and hear each other's voices. It's a contemporary miracle, and we should be thankful that we have it at our disposal. But speaking personally, when I'm interacting on Zoom and can enjoy the connection with others, I remain very aware that the two-dimensional image I see is not a three-dimensional reality. The very technology that thankfully brings a connection paradoxically reminds me of the distance that still separates me from you. And though this connection is very, very good, it still remains not optimal. In my personal view, it's not good enough. I need and crave more. Humanist that I am, I believe that nothing, simply nothing, can replace another person whose living presence I can feel, whose body language I can read, whose emotions I can more directly and intimately grasp. It is the very distance that underscores the vital importance of human connection, of the human bond. That connection is constitutive of our very humanity. Perhaps the ethical value that is most pronounced in our current environment, which comes closest to ethical culture and its ideals, is an appreciation for the mutual responsibility that we as human beings share with each other, indeed all of us, emerging from the place each of us occupies in that web of humanity. In Hindu mythology, there's the metaphor of what's known as Indra's net, which appears also in Buddhism. In the Vedas, which are Hinduism's seminal texts, Indra is the king of the gods, and he has over his palace an infinite net, which is constructed in such a way that each node where the ropes are tied together, there is a jewel, and all the jewels reflect all the other jewels in this infinite net. It is a metaphor suggestive of the interdependence of all things, including the interdependence and reciprocal relations that we human beings exercise with all members of the human family. Felix Adler, ethical culture's founder, had a similar notion. He affirmed that all people are joined together in what he referred to as a vast spiritual organism, referred to it sometimes with the inelegant term, the ethical manifold, in such a way that we are all connected to each other, and each one of us is connected to the whole, to the entire organism. So ethically speaking, because we are all internet connected, when we act, we affect changes in all others and in society as a whole. And when we strive to bring out the best in others, because we are connected, we reciprocally bring out the best in ourselves. By attempting to influence others, we are ourselves transformed. Moreover, although we are distinct individuals, we are at the same time joined together in this interdependent relationship to all others. This suggests that while we strive to exercise our freedom, individual freedom, in our interdependence, we also bear obligations to each other and to humanity as a whole. I cannot think of any circumstance in the human experience whatsoever, any circumstance within memory that better exemplifies, more dramatically exemplifies this notion of interdependent obligation than what the current pandemic currently imposes upon us. As we all know, we all need to behave in such a way as to not become infected by the virus. We all strive to protect ourselves, but at the same time, we need to be equally cautious not to infect others as well. Whether we know them or not, whether we like them or not, is irrelevant. The only fact that counts is that the other person is a fellow human being who is universally subject to the same illness that I am, and who universally wishes to preserve her or his health and life. In short, if we wish to protect ourselves, this is the point, if we wish to protect ourselves, we need to protect others. Because if we fail to do so by infecting others, we raise the level of infection in society as a whole and further endanger ourselves along with it. We all need to be bound, each to the other and each to all, in a contract of mutual protection that unites us all in a common life-saving purpose. We're all in this together. We may not be heroes on the front line, but each and every one of us has an absolutely essential and critical role to play in the face of the coronavirus pandemic. No one whatsoever is exempt from this obligation. We're all in it, we all count. That role, friends, is a preeminently ethical role. And if each of us does our part, guided by our ethical selves, our best selves, we will fortify our chances that we will triumph over the scourge and live on to a better day. So, health, life, humanity, and ethics demand it. Good morning, friends. Thanks for your good attention and permitting me to share some of my thoughts about the moment with you. David, it's time for questions.
Thank you, Joe,
my
for that very compelling address. We are going to have question and answers this morning, but first, we have a message from our Finance Committee. Are you missing that cozy feeling you get when you get an opportunity to make a little deposit into the collection basket after platform? Fret no more. Introducing the virtual collection basket. At the end of our virtual platform this morning, we'll have a chance to make a little donation for the work of the Society, but only if you're comfortable. We'll have a donate button ready to make you feel like you're right at home, passing the basket in our meeting house. In these tough times, every little bit helps. We're giving you an opportunity, if you would like to avail yourself of the collection basket during the question and answers, to find a credit card if you wanted to do that. So, thank you very much, David. We are now going to move along to question and answer, where you can use your raise hand feature, and David will announce you and let you ask your question.
And I want to mention people who are on the phone dialed in can press *9 to raise their hand. Our first question is from Pam Berglund. Go ahead, Pam.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my question. Actually, it's really an observation that I have been making about the whole situation with social distancing. We, as our organization, we're having this wonderful opportunity to meet like we normally meet. But there are some very selfish people out there who are spreading this disease more and more because church pastors and reverends and religious leaders are bringing people together in their churches and creating more havoc. And I was looking this morning online on television, and there were 3 groups that had packed audiences. Why can't these people understand that they're making everything worse for us? Why can't they have televisions and television shows. If they have a television show, which like Olsen and Charles something or other, why can't they just be on TV like we're on Zoom? It is so upsetting to me. I'm getting more and more panicky about this virus. And it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, Eric Sandhusen, next.
Hi, Joe, what you said about, this method of getting together being two-dimensional and a poor substitute for actual being together and physical contact or being in close proximity. But something occurred to me, and I'm just going to invite everybody, bring it all in here. Come on, everybody, for a group hug. Come on, everybody. Get up there next. I see you. Come on. Robert, good to see you. Tracy, come on. Everybody in for a group hug.
Yay!
Yeah, right? Okay. Still not as good as a group hug, but it's what it is. So,
Well,
thank you.
Thank you. Let me
you, Joe.
make one comment. One virtue of this approach that we don't have with get-together meetings, I mean, it's a mixed bag. Again, for me, and this is my temperament, my values, nothing substitutes for being in real place, in real time with a real human being, face-to-face. But I should say one virtue of this is that it enables people who live at a distance, who could never make it to our meeting house or very seldom, to be part of the community. So I'm looking right in the middle of my screen. I'm looking at Esther Herring. Boy, what a pleasure that she's with us, and her folks who live, about 4,000 miles away, right? And 6 time zones, right? What is it, 5 o'clock? It's about almost 6 o'clock in the evening where you are. They can join us here in our time, and our place, which is just great. So there are virtues to this medium, right? That face-to-face meetings don't allow, right? Okay, thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Hey, Susan, did you have a...
Yes, I
go
did.
ahead.
Thank you. So something that we are doing, David and I are doing, to honor the frontline community of first responders and people who are working in healthcare, is at 7 o'clock every night for 2 minutes, we walk out our front door and we applaud all frontline responders, that whole community. I've actually been banging a pot so that people kind of come out and say, what's going on? And we've now got quite a few of our neighbors coming out at 7 o'clock for 2 minutes to applaud. It gives you a good feeling to be doing something positive.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, I think that's become a national movement. I mean, there are communities around the country who are acknowledging the heroes in similarly public ways. Right. Good.
Hey, Sandy Krolik.
Hello.
Hello. You are.
Hello.
Go ahead.
No, thank you very much. It was very interesting to listen to your presentation. I thought it was very well prepared.
Thank you.
It was very easy to follow as well.
Yeah.
The thing that strikes me as interesting is almost the paradox of where we brought ourselves to in the present day. In terms of the fact that I think globalism versus tribalism as a major issue in today's world, vis-a-vis Donald Trump and others, it really puts us in a sort of a pickle, because on the one hand, we're trying to open up globally, which itself brings us to the brink of these problems that we have. And I'm just thinking about when the Europeans came to the New World and what happened to the indigenous populations of America, you know, either unintentionally or not, with respect to disease. So I think it's really intriguing that the further we get along down this path of globalism, the further we entrench ourselves into possibilities that could bring a demise to the very civilization that we're trying to create.
Right. Certainly to democratic forms. I mean, I've talked about this from the platform many, many times, and this is really the subject matter for many addresses and a lot of public reflection and education. But there's a connection between globalization, as I see it, and tribalism, and the fact that globalization has indeed meant that much of our business has gone overseas and is put into the hands of China and its burgeoning economy. I mean, I think it's a shameful reality that we don't have enough masks in the United States because they're produced in China and so forth. This is, I think, a national disgrace. But I think that the movement of a lot of manufacturing industry production overseas to other countries that has devastated, helped to devastate American communities. And when people feel hopeless with regard to their economic opportunities, they turn inward. They parochialize. And in effect, one of the consequences, perhaps somewhat paradoxically, but I think can be explicated quite readily, one of the consequences of globalization has been the emergence of tribalism. There's a line connecting both of those phenomena. They may seem oppositional in certain respects, and yet there is a causative relationship, I believe, between the movement towards globalization and tribalism that we see on the American soil. But I think it's really shameful. You know, my own analysis, I could go on and on about this because I think it's among the crucial issues of our time that we have to get back to addressing after, you know, we get beyond the pandemic, is that indeed is the economic disparity in this country. To my mind, the absence of ventilators, for example, that are crucial in order to save tens of thousands of lives in this moment, and the fact that we don't have them is a piece with the rotting out of America's infrastructure. That is the consequence of establishing a plutocracy in this country that has basically made some people very, very wealthy at the expense of the rest of society that just plods along. And I think this is unmasking, to use a bad metaphor, unmasking the realities of the American economy. And hopefully after this is done, we'll have a revived and inspired political movement that will try to engender economic egalitarianism in this society, because without it, our democracy is gone.
Am I still on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to add a final point on what I said, and with respect to your raising the issue of Hinduism, I think it was Shiva who spins the illusion of reality, and I suspect that the pandemic is now helping to unravel that illusion.
Yes, it unmasks a lot of things, a lot of values, both negative ones, and it's brought to the fore very, very positive values. And hopefully we can build on those positive values.
Thanks again.
Okay. Laszlo, go ahead. Having a little trouble unmuting you. Let's see. Laszlo, I'm sorry, I can't unmute you. Let's go on to Esther Herring, and I'll see if I can unmute you again. I don't know why.
Okay, I'm muting myself.
Good.
Good. I started it. Okay, good. I think it's the question of two paths that I guess in front of humanity. I think globalization in itself is we shouldn't look back at the past, but we should look for the future. And I think the two paths that actually Yuval Harari this morning, which I find a bit light, but still was saying, is that one is that the inequality is going to increase, and in the hands of people who are, going to have a fashion. But you see at this point, most of the world is frightening, because if those guys are continuing holding the reins and the directions the world is going, we are looking forward to this topic future. The other option is whether humanity will be able to find the means and movements to actually control the future, global future cannot be avoided. I mean, in a sense, globalization is that our interconnectedness is given. It's nothing that could be turned around, and going back to some sort of an ideal thing is impossible. I think we should have to look forward, and have to look forward in a sense of global equality. That's increasing the equality if it's possible. I always used to talk from a revolution perspective, but I'm as blind as the next person. So that was something here.
Okay, thank you, Leslie.
Thank you. Okay, Esther Herring, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking what Susan also mentioned, that you go outside and you bang a pot to thank everybody in the front line. And here in the Netherlands, you said it was a national thing. I would like to say it's an international thing. We had the same thing here, people going outside and clapping hands and doing things. And we now also have this movement that we thank people continuously by hanging a white t-shirt in our window with a red heart on it. And I live pretty close to the hospital, and you see people actually hanging big flags outside with red hearts on it and making, thanking people like that. And, parents that want to have their little kids not be so bored at home and everything. We have this little book in the Netherlands. It's called Going on a Bear Hunt. And it's actually really nice. People went like, you know what, let's actually go on a bear hunt. And they put these little stuffed animals in front of their windows so that when little kids go outside, they can actually go for a bear hunt and find the little bears. And you see this sense of community coming together, and it's amazing. It's amazing to see. So, and people being really creative, because like I live on the first floor of an apartment building, and my little stuffed animal is just little. So I made a big window drawing of a stuffed animal bear, and people being all these creative ways of supporting each other and coming together.
Yeah, well, it underscores a point that I was making. I find it interesting and illuminating and inspiring as to how a universal plague has really engendered universal and common responses, and they've been very good ones. So thank you for that. Yeah, I have other Dutch friends, and they tell me that the situation in Holland in terms of restrictions and so on and so forth, and so forth, is very similar to what we're experiencing here in the United States. It really joins us together with other places. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim Norman, go ahead.
Actually, it's not me. It's Ginger who raised her hand, and here she is.
No, it's wonderful to say hello to all of you. And I guess you find different ways of doing things. I have been able to offer piano lessons to my students. I was so quickly and completely cut off from them in the usual way. And through Zoom and FaceTime, I'm able to keep some connection going, and it is better than nothing. So I look for that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? And I want to remind people who are dialed in that if they press *9, it will raise their hand and I'll get the signal. Okay, I think we're done with Q&A.
Well, good. Thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, great seeing you all. Yeah, thanks for your participation and your interest.
Yes, thank you, Joe, for speaking this morning
My pleasure.
and giving us many things to think about. I'd like to start our thank yous this morning thanking Terry and Ken Karp, Teresa Forsman, and David Bland for their tireless efforts this week to ensure that we had a safe access for our virtual platform address this morning. There were many, many meetings last week to test out the system, to allow everyone to participate while preventing malicious bad actors. We feel confident that moving forward, we'll be able to continue to offer our virtual events and opportunities to our community. This morning, our online hosts were Terry Karp and David Bland. Thank you both for bringing us into our virtual meeting room. The recording from today will be posted sometime this week. At this time, we have